are now about to start recording the share. When you are finished, please hang up.
Okay, once again, good Tavach, everybody, as we are sponsored by Shalom Fogel, Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam Bas Gad, Yosef ben Sion ben Yaakov Zev, by Baruch Ian, Lila Nishmas Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther Bas Gittel, Avram ben Shmuel HaKain, Yaakov Yumansky, with Akar Satayv to the Rav, and our Zoom family, and Nachas from children and grandchildren, A.B. Spry, Nachas from children and grandchildren, and Salah from London, Joshua Rosenberg, a ritual Talmud, again, Refuah Shalem to Aaron Swade, and a Mazel Tov to Rabbi Kranz on the birth of an Einikel. We welcome in Saba, we welcome in Stephen Holtzman, we welcome Aaron Swade, A.B. Spry, we welcome in Nachman Chapler, Dr. Guy, Irving Fishbaum, Rabbi Kranz, Dr. Black, Mel Zachter, we welcome in Shelley Zeitlin, and Michael, Marshall Castle, Yitzi Fuchs, Gedalia Engel, Avram Schenkman, Moshe Lehman, Ben Zion Cohn, Ben Kaniel, Avram Rezepkowitz, Ilya Shutman, Yitzi Muller, Chaim Braun, Daniel Rosenberg, Abe Arbach. We welcome here in the shul, Berish Gesseman, Michal Avram Chavin, Ruvain Shannon, and David Healthgott. On Kol Lashon, Sandy Grunfeld, we learn it's a yard site of Esther Gittel Bas Gedalia, and Shama should have an Aliyah, and we are holding on the top of Pei Amid Aleph. Halikeach Peiris Shevech Mechaverai. If Marshall buys the doves of a dovecote from Shelley. He buys the produce of the dovecote, not the dovecote itself, just the produce of the dovecote. Now, what he has to make sure is Shelley sells him this year's produce of the dovecote. So he has to make sure that he allows Shelley's dovecote to continue to be prosperous. So mafriach breicha rishayna. The way it works is that usually 11 months of the year, the mother dove produces each month a boy and a girl, a male and a female. So he has to leave the first set, the first pair, he has to leave it by Shelley so that the mother will have company, that she shouldn't fly away. And we're going to see in the Gemara that he actually has to leave two sets. He has to leave two pairs. One pair for company for the mother, and another pair for the company of the first children, because they won't be satisfied with the company of the mother. Peris Keveres, if, let's say, Marshall buys from Shelley the produce of a beehive, bees of a beehive, so Noitel, what happens is that Marshall gets Gimel Nechilim, the first three swarms. What happens is it produces, the hive produces a lot of bees, and when they get to capacity, they swarm out and sit on a branch. That's called a swarm. So Marshall gets three swarms, and then umasaris, and then he cuts it off. Now the Gemara is going to say three different pshatim of what it means, and then it's cut off. I'll tell you one pshat now, the Gemara's first pshat, that after the three swarms, Shelley has the bees eat mustard. And when they eat mustard, it gives them a bitter taste. So they go back in the hive and they eat the honey in the hive. And either that gives room for them to hibernate and it stops them from swarming further, or they stop mating because they are busy producing more honey. So he gets 3 swarms. The Gemara is going to say completely different shatim in this. Chalas dvash. Let's say Marshall is not interested in bees, he's interested in the honey. So if he buys honeycombs, maniach beis chalas, he has to leave 2 honeycombs for the food for the residents of the hive. Zeisim lokites. If Marshall buys from Shelley olive trees to cut down for their wood, maniach shtei grufiyos, he can't cut it all the way down to the ground because then it won't regenerate. But rather instead he leaves the height until the second lowest branch, and then he cuts it down. Now, our Mishnah says that when Marshall buys the doves, he has to leave the first pair of birds. Says Gemara Vatanya, but we learned in a Braisa Brecha Rishayna Vishniya that he has to leave the first 2 pairs of birds. Rav Kahana like Kasha Hala Ima. When it said in our Mishnah 1 pair, that was for company for the mother, so that the mother shouldn't fly away and that Shelley's dovecote should continue to operate. The second pair is a pair for the first son and daughter. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Why do you need, just like the first pair is company for the mother and her mate, so the mother and the mate should be company for the first pair. Maishna ima, what's the difference that the mother, the mitztafsa abrata vazuga, that she finds company with the daughter and its mate? The shafkina law that we leave for her, ihi nami, so the daughter and her mate should be titztafsa, should have company by aima, by the mother, va'azuga, and her mate. Says the Gemara, the shafkina law, which we leave for her. In other words, they should be company for each other. So here the Gemara, which is a real contemporary lesson in generational gaps, a mother could find company in her daughter, but the daughter, it won't be suffice the company of the mother. She's an old fogey. That's not enough. Ima brata mitztafsa, the mother will find company in the daughter. Brata ima, the daughter from the mother, loy mitztafsa, she needs the next generation. Now, let's go now talk about the swarms, because Shelley and Marshall have been doing a lot of business in a lot of different areas. Peris keferes, if Marshall buys from Shelley the bees of a hive, noitel gimel nechilim, he takes the first 3 swarms, umasaris, which literally means, and then castrates, that it shouldn't produce more. B'memasarsan, how does he castrate them? Rav Yudah Meshmul b'chardel, by feeding them mustard. And this is explained, Imrei b'marava, this is explained in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, which is to the west of Bavel. Mishmei de Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, loy chardel mesarsan. It's not the mustard that actually castrates the bees. Because their mouth gets the sharp taste of the mustard, now they have to douse the sharpness. They go ahead and they eat their honey. And therefore, either, different pshatim in the Rishonim, either now there's room in the hive to hibernate, so they go and hibernate and stop mating, or now instead of mating, they produce more honey. Rabbi Yochanan says Mesaris, there's another meaning to Mesaris. When the Gemara says Serus, it means every other one. Rabbi Yochanan says, since each of the swarms, the first swarm is the most robust, every swarm subsequently is a little weaker. So Shelley does not sell Marshall the whole stock. Rabbi Yochanan noitel shloisha nechilim besirus. Marshall gets 3 swarms alternately. He gets the first swarm, the third swarm, and the 5th swarm. B'masnisa Tana, the Brisa says no. Noitel gimel nechilim b'zeh achazeh. The first 3 swarms, Marshall gets 1, 2, and 3. Mekan ve'elach noitel achas u'maniach achas. After that, he takes every other one. So we have three different shatim in what it means mesares. Now, let's get to the honeycombs. Chalois dvash, honeycombs, maniach shtei chalos. Marshall has to leave 2 honeycombs for the hive. So now the Gemara gets off in a tangent about Tumah V'Tara. And the question is, are the honey in the hive, is it Mekabel Tumah? You see, it's only Mekabel Tumah if it's designated for human food. The question is the honey in the hives, which are eaten by bees, is it considered automatically a human food? Is it considered a food which transmits tumah with the size of a beya? Or is it considered a liquid which transmits tumah the size of a revius? Or we'll see there's an opinion that the kaiveres, since it's attached to the ground, maybe it has a din like karka. And since karka is not mekabel tumah, maybe the honey, when it's in the hive, doesn't accept tumah at all. So now, with all of this in mind, let's see what the Gemara says over here. Amar Rav Kahana, dvash b'kaiveres, honey in a beehive, eina yotze midei machal la'olam. It doesn't lose its status of a food. So that means that we're learning here 2 things. Number 1, it doesn't have a din like karka. Number 2, it's not considered like food for the bees, but since it's fit for humans, it's considered human food and it's susceptible to contamination. Alma kesaver loy boy machshava. It doesn't need specific designation to make it into a human food. Meisvei, dvash b'keiferes, honey in a beehive, einoi loy oichel v'loy mashke. Doesn't have a din of a food, it doesn't have a din of a beverage. So that's clearly not like Rav Kahana. Amar Abaye says, no, that's talking about just the 2 loaves that were left for the bees. Our Mishnah says Marshall has to leave 2 chalos, 2 honeycombs for the bees. So those are not mekabel tumah because those that are set not for human consumption. Amar Abaye leitzricha loisen shtei chalos. Rav Amenarva says no. The one who says that it's not mekabel tumah as a food or a mashke, that's going according to Rebbe Eliezer, who holds that the kaiveres has a din of karka. Rav Amar Rebbe Eliezer, it's going according to Rebbe Eliezer. The Tanan, we learned this already. We had it earlier in the Masechta. The Tanan kaiveres dvarim, a beehive. Rebbe Eliezer, Aimar Harihut kekarka. It has a din of real estate, and therefore the kaisvin olah pruzbul. Remember, we said that the only time they made a pruzbul is by a milsa deshchicha. And since you only give a loan to somebody that has real estate, so that you could have a lien on the real estate, you could only write a pruzbul if somebody has real estate. Otherwise, it's a milsa d'shchicha, and a milsa d'shchicha avid rabbanan takanta. So he says that the beehive has a din of karka, and therefore the kaisman olah pruzbul. You could write a pruzbul. Ve'ena mekabel is tumah, and therefore it's not susceptible to tumah because karka is not mekabel tumah. b'mekayma, when it's attached. V'roidim imena b'Shabbos, and if therefore, since it's considered mechubel karka, if you remove honey from it on Shabbos, chayiv chatas. Now the Chacham will argue on all of this. The Chacham if it doesn't have a din of real estate, therefore ain't kaismin all that principle. If the debtor only has that, you can't write a principle. Ve'ena kikarka, it's not like real estate or mekabelas tumah b'mekayma. It accepts contamination. V'roidim imena b'Shabbos, and one who removes from it on Shabbos is potter. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Now Rabbi Lazar says, by the way, why do we hold that it's considered attached to the ground? My time of Rabbi Eliezer. So we said we learned it out from a pasuk in Shmuel. Vayitpal oisa b'yaras hadvash. He dipped it into the honeycomb, the forest of honey. And the question is, why do we talk about a forest when we're talking about honey? What's the connection between a forest and honey? Just like a forest. If you cut something from it in Shabbos chayiv chatas, it's a sin offering. It's one of the 39 malachas. So also honey, Shabbos chayiv chatas. Asks the Gemara, Meisvei, dvash hazov mikavartai, honey that drips from the beehive, it's not a food nor a beverage. Now that fits very good according to Abaya's explanation. Abaya says it was talking about the two loaves that you leave for the bees, so it was only designated for food for the bees. But according to Rava, it's only attached when it's in the ground. But if it drips out, then it should be food. El Rava kasha. Amar Rav Zvid kigain shizav al gabe klei. While it was attached to the ground, it wasn't mekabel tamu because it was part from the ground. And when it drips out, it's talking about when it drips into a filthy vessel, and therefore it's not fit for eating. It dripped on splinters. If the honey is mixed with splinters, and remember it's sticky, the honey mixed with splinters, you're not able to eat it. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, new question. And it's so nice to see so many people joining us this evening on the Motzei Shabbos. Meisvei, dvash b'kavartai, honey in a beehive. Honey in a beehive is not a food nor a liquid. If you, however, designate it as food, it'll be fit for tumas to transmit tumah with the share of an egg. The mashkin, if you designate for human beverage, metame tumas mashkin. Now this is very good. This is very good according to Abaya, because Abaya says it was talking about the two loaves that were designated for the bees. But if you designate it for human food, then it's going to be mekabel tumah. El Rava, even if you designate it for food, if it's attached to the ground, kasha. Amalach Rava taritzachi. No, you have to amend it. If you, even if you designate it for food, because it's attached to the ground, and karka is not mekabel tumah. Lamashkin ein metamatumas mashkin. Now, Tani Kavasi Rav Kahana. We have a brayso like Rav Kahana. Remember, Rav Kahana said that honey is automatically considered a food. Dvash b'kavartoi, honey in its beehive, metami tumas oichlin, it's susceptible to the tumah of food, shaloi b'machshav, without designation, because it's considered automatically a human food. For those that are just joining us all over the world, we are now starting the first wide line on Daf Pei Amud Beis, just getting underway on a beautiful Motzei Shabbos, really moving ground nicely. Wonder where Mark is. We're missing Mark. He's not with us. Baruchian is not with us. Shalom Fogel is not with us. Okay, now, Zaysim Lokites, if Marshall buys from Shelley olive trees to cut down, Maniach Shtei Grufiyos, he has to leave the height of the tree up to the second lowest branch, that he can't cut because he wants it to regenerate, but after that he could cut. Tan Rabbana. Halikeach Elon Mechaverai. If Marshall buys from his friend, Marshall has a few friends, Shelley is one of them. I don't know. There's no questioning a person's tastes, but anyway, I know that Shelley people are swayed by their stomachs, and Shelley likes Marshall's chili. It's really it's one of the great lessons of the Torah. Vayav Yitzchak es Esav kisayed befiv, and one shot is that Esav used to cook for him. The road to a man's heart is through his stomach. So I noticed that when I mentioned Marshall, Shelley is smiling. Now, how could that be? The answer is it has to do with the chili connection. Now, so let's get to this odd couple over here. So, halikeach Elon mechaverai lakutz. If Marshall buys a tree from Shelley to cut down, magvia min hakarka tefach, he has to allow a stump the height of a tefach, the kaitzitz, and then he could cut, because if he allows a stump of a tefach, it'll regenerate. B'sulas hashikma, if it's a virgin sycamore tree, he has to leave a height of gimel tvachim. Sadin hashikma, if it's a sycamore tree that was already cut down once before, beis tvachim, then he has to leave a stump of 2 tvachim. Bikonim u'gafanim, if it's a reeds or vines, min hapkak ulamala, he could cut from the first knot. He has to wait till the knot in the tree, and after the first knot, he could cut it down. B'dekolim u'ba'arozim, by date palms and cedar, chayfer u'misharish. Marshall could dig it up and uproot the whole thing, because they don't regenerate. Lefisha ein gizon machlef. Now the Gemara is going to tell us that's not true by all cedars. There's different types. We're going to see that there's 10 different types of cedar. Says the Gemara, "Basulas hashikma gimel tvachim ba'inan." Does a virgin sycamore tree need 3 tvachim v'reminu? Now we know that you're not allowed to do any cutting on Shemitah of a tree that helps to facilitate its growth. It says, you can't do botany where it's going to facilitate growth. So, because it facilitates its growth. You can't cut it in the normal way. You could cut it if it's a destructive way. Rather, you could leave it to the height of 10 tvachim and cut it, because if you cut it only after the height, leaving a 10 tvachim thing, that doesn't facilitate its growth. Or cut it flat to the ground. So the Gemara says, but we said that a b'sulus shikma you have to leave 3 tvachim. Here it's mashma me'im ha'haretzu dekashi. That flat to the ground is detrimental. Ha'idach, even if you leave 1 tefach, it's malila. While we said that Marshall has to leave Shelley 3 tvachim. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, look, when you buy it, gimel tvachim malila. 3 tvachim is certainly good for it. When you do it flat to the ground, vadi kashila. That's definitely injurious. That definitely hurts it. Is that the right way to pronounce it? Injurious? Injurious. Mikan ve'ela, between flat in the ground and 3, loy makshe kashila, it's not that injurious. V'lav iloy malila, it's not certainly beneficial. Gabe shviyas, by shmita, we are not allowed to facilitate growth. We make sure to do something that's injurious. Avdina mide devadi kashila, we do it for cut it flat to the ground. Gabi Mekach Memku, where Shelley is, stipulating that it should be able to regenerate for him, you have to do something certainly beneficial. Gabi Mekach Memcha Avdina Mide Devade Malila. That's definitely beneficial, and therefore you have to leave it until 3 tvachim. Now we said b'dikolim u'ba'arazim, by date palms and by cedar, chayfer u'mesharish, Marshall could dig it up and uproot it, lefisha ein gizon machlef, because it doesn't regenerate. So the Gemara says, "Be'erez ein gizon machlef." Do cedar not regenerate? V'adarish Rab Chia bar Lulaynei. We know that we compare a tzaddik to a date palm and a cedar. Ma'idich tzaddik katama yifrach. The righteous will blossom like a date palm. Ke'erez balvanan yishke. They will flourish like a cedar in Lebanon. So the question is, why do we compare a tzaddik both to a date palm and to a cedar? Im nema tama lama nema erez. If it says date palm, why does it say cedar? Im nema erez, and if it says cedar, lama nema tama, why does it say a date palm? So the Gemara says like this. Ilu nemar erez, if it would say cedar, v'loy nemar tamar, hayisi aimer ma erez, and erez doesn't produce fruit. Ein oisa peiris, it doesn't produce fruit. Av tzaddik ein oisa peiris. I might think that the tzaddik doesn't produce fruit. Either this means that the tzaddik is not going to be oichel peiroiseyem ba'olam hazeh. The tzaddik is not going to get, he's only going to get reward in the next world. L'kach nematama, that's why he compares him to a date palm which has dates. So he's going to get the principle in the next world, but fruit in this world. But v'im nematama v'loy nemar erez, if it says a date palm and it doesn't say a cedar, hayisi ayma mat tamar ein gizay machlef, it doesn't regenerate. I might think af tzaddik ein gizay machlef, he won't regenerate. He won't have children that are like him. L'kach nemar erez, so you see that an erez does regenerate. Why does it say that Marshall could uproot the date palm and the cedar because it doesn't regenerate? Here we see that a cedar does regenerate. Says Gemara, there's all kinds of cedar. There are some cedar that don't regenerate, and there's some species that do, because we're going to see that there's 10 species of cedar. Kedarabba baravuna, damarabba baravuna, imrei bei Rav. They said in the academy of Rav, Yud mine arozenheim. There are 10 types of cedar. 10 types. Amazing thing. When the Gemara says cedar, there's 10 types of cedar. Shenemar etain bamidbar, I will give you in the desert. Erez shita hadas the 8 shemen osim, and the Gemara goes through what are these different types of cedar. Erez is ours. That's the species known as cedar. Shita is Turanisa. That's the pine. Hadas is osa. Hadas is myrtle. 8 shemen is afarsima, is balsam. Broish is brussi. That's a cypress tree. Tida is shaga, which is teak. And so Asher is Shavina. So Asher is Shavina. Rashbam says we don't know what species of tree Shavina is. So the Gemara says you just mentioned 7 trees. You didn't mention 10 trees. Says Gemara Hani Zayin Have. See, Ki Os Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came, he said, Hoisifu Aleim Aloinim, Almoinim, and Almugim. Now what are those 3 trees? The Gemara says Aloinim is Butni. They translate this as the terebinth tree. Almoinim bluti, that's the oak, and almogim, that's sisa, that's coral. Coral grows from the sea. Ikidam, right? Others say that the last three types of cedar are aronim, armonim, and almugim. Aronim, right? That's the laurel tree. Armonim is dulvle, which is chestnut. And almugin is kasisa, as we said, is the coral. So those are the 10 types of cedar trees. Okay, we're just going to pause a moment over here to change the channel.